In the heart of fog-wrapped town stood a crooked little shop with brass bells on its door and a faded sign that read, Erasmus Holt, Master Clockmaker. Most people passed by without paying much attention. Its dusty windows revealed only shadows of gears, pendulums, and strange timepieces stacked upon shelves. But behind that door lived a man who was no ordinary craftsman. Erasmus Holt was the last in a long line of clockmakers who carried a secret. Their clocks did not just measure time. They could alter it. As a boy, Erasmus had been given a peculiar pocket watch by his grandfather. One morning, when he turned the hands back in desperation to avoid being late for school, the world seemed to shiver. Suddenly, he was standing in front of his house again, 10 minutes earlier, with the chance to relive the moment. That day, he discovered his gift. From then on, time became more than hours and minutes to him. It was fabric he could fold, stitch, and stretch. To the townsfolk, Erasmus was nothing more than an eccentric man who lived among clocks. His hair prematurely silver, his hands trembling with age far too early. They never suspected that it was he who quietly saved them over and over. When floods threatened the streets, he rewound the hours so the river never swelled too high. When fires broke out, he bent the night so that flames died before spreading. But every change carried a cost. With each winding, a piece of his own life slipped away. One autumn evening, as mist rolled thick over the cobblestones, a stranger stepped into the shop. A woman, cloaked in black, placed a broken pocket watch on his counter. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "This belonged to my father. He said it could undo death. Can you fix it?" Erasmus froze. The watch was not ordinary. It was one of the forbidden creations his ancestors had forged long ago, capable of reversing the final boundary. He warned her of the dangers. To turn death backward is to unweave the world. Every second stolen must be paid for. But grief burned brighter than caution in her eyes, and she begged for just one day with her father. Against his better judgment, Erasmus agreed. By candlelight, he worked through the night, replacing gears with silver, springs with crystal, and using the rarest material of all, time siphoned from his own life. When the final cog clicked, the watch pulsed like a living heart. The woman seized it, ignoring his trembling voice as he repeated his warning. She turned the hands back, and the air grew heavy. A shimmer passed through the room, and her father appeared before them, alive but dazed. For a heartbeat, joy filled the shop. Then the fracture began. Every clock on the shelf stopped. Outside, the town square froze. Birds hung motionless in the sky, leaves suspended in midfall. Time itself was unraveling. The woman clung to her father, but reality buckled under the weight of what she had undone. Erasmus knew there was only one way to restore balance. With what strength remained, he reached for the oldest of his timepieces, his grandfather's watch, the very first. He wound it backwards, giving not minutes, not hours, but the very years of his own life. His body aged in seconds, bones weakening, hair turning white as snow. But he did not stop. The world shook, screamed, then slowly stitched itself back together. The town stirred once more. Birds flew, leaves fell, and the woman and her father were gone, erased with the broken timeline. When dawn arrived, the people found the shop empty. The clock still ticked in perfect harmony, but Erasmus Holt was nowhere to be seen. Some say he became part of the very flow of time, a shadow watching from between the seconds. Others whisper that in the deepest corner of the shop lies an unfinished clock, its pendulum still waiting for hands brave or foolish enough to wind again. And so, the secret of the clockmaker lives on, not in the ticking of gears, but in the hidden whispers of hours that never were, and in the quiet thought of a town that owes its life to a man who gave away all his own. Though Erasmus Holt was gone, the shop remained. Its crooked walls leaned against time itself, and the clocks inside kept ticking, even though no one had touched them for weeks. The townsfolk avoided the place, whispering that it was cursed. At night, when fog smothered the streets, they claimed they heard faint chimes, clocks striking hours that did not exist. One evening, a boy named Samuel dared to step inside. He had always been drawn to the strange hum that seemed to pulse from behind the locked door. To his surprise, the shop welcomed him. The bells over the door rang though he hadn't touched them, and the air was thick with the smell of brass and oil. Every clock ticked in perfect unison, and yet, somehow, each one carried a different rhythm, like 100 hearts beating at once. Samuel wandered through rows of dusty shelves until he found a clock unlike the others. It was unfinished, its pendulum frozen mid-swing, its hands pointing to no hour at all. Carved into its wooden frame was a phrase he could barely read. Time belongs to those who dare. Something deep inside him stirred, as though the clock had been waiting only for him. When his hand brushed the brass surface, the room shivered, the air bent, and in an instant Samuel found himself standing in the very same shop. But it was no longer dusty or abandoned. Erasmus Holt stood at the workbench, alive, younger, his hand steady as he worked on a delicate gear. Samuel gasped, realizing he had stepped into the past. Erasmus lifted his head. His silver eyes narrowed, as though he recognized the boy. "So you found it," he murmured. "I wondered who would be bold enough to touch the unfinished clock." Samuel stammered, unable to understand what was happening. But Erasmus smiled with a sadness that seemed older than the world itself. He explained that the unfinished clock was never meant to be wound by him. It was a key, not a timepiece, created to choose its own keeper when the moment was right. "Time always seeks a guardian," he said, "and now it has chosen you." The boy trembled. "But I don't know how. I don't even know what this means." Erasmus guided him to the workbench, placing the unfinished clock between them. "Every gear, every spring, every tick carries weight. Time is not infinite. It is a river, and a river must be guided lest it overflow. You must protect it, not use it for selfish ends." His voice grew heavy. "But beware, for there are those who would bend time not to save, but to rule." As Erasmus spoke, the shop around them fractured, shadows stretching long and jagged. The vision began to fade, and Samuel felt himself being pulled back. Before the boy vanished, Erasmus pressed something into his hand. A small brass key shaped like a clock hand. "Remember," the clockmaker whispered, "time does not forgive." Samuel blinked, and he was back in the abandoned shop, standing before the silent, unfinished clock. In his palm gleamed the brass key, warm as though it had just been forged. From that day on, he carried the burden of a secret he could barely comprehend. The clocks in the shop continued their endless ticking, but Samuel could feel them watching him, as if waiting for the moment when he would finally dare to turn the key. And beyond the fog-wrapped town, in places where shadows bent strangely and hours vanished without reason, whispers spread of a new guardian rising, one who had yet to understand that the greatest power of time was not in bending it, but in knowing when to let it flow. Sparkles, the clockmaker's legacy, had not ended. It had only shifted hands. The river of time had chosen a new keeper, and the world would soon test him. You're very welcome for listening to this story. Glowing Star, thank you for your time and support. It means the world. Folded hands.